Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Committee of Warwick District Council on the 14th of January 2025. I'll start by wishing you all a Happy New Year. I've not seen most of you. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. This will then be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel in due course. Details of how the recordings are stored and how long they are retained are available via the Council's website. Emergency procedure. There are no planned tests of the emergency alarm. If the alarm does sound, everyone present must leave by the designated exit route via the main reception. If the preferred route is blocked, use the nearest signed alternative route. Do not use the lift. Everyone must assemble at the designated point, which is next to the County Museum and Marketplace. Members of the public and press should report to a member of the reception team who will be wearing yellow fluorescent jackets. Councillors and officers should report to the committee services officer. Please do not re-enter the building until a fire officer advises that it's safe to do so. I have alongside me, second one in, Gary Fisher, Development Manager, and Planning Officers, Rose Sleven, Rebecca Compton and Thomas Senior. Legal Advisors on my extreme left is Nigel Bell. Committee Services Officer is Emily Parsons, and she's supported by Mia Matthews and Laura Burrell, who are observing unless things go horribly wrong, which they won't. Members, please can I draw your attention to the update report published earlier today, which summarises questions and answers, as well as comments of support in relation to today's agenda items. Apologies and substitutes. There have been no apologies and substitutes received. Members, could I ask if any of you have any apologies? No. Members' declaration of interest. Anyone with a pecuniary interest will need to leave the room and will be called back in at the end of the item. Members are also reminded of a need to declare predetermination on any matter. Please, may I have any declarations of interest? I'll give mine. I did visit Newnham Road this afternoon. There's also been a number of emails. Sorry?
Sorry, I just want to say that I also visited Newnham Road this afternoon, and I visited Berwick Close in Woodlows Park on Sunday afternoon.
Right, thank you. Didn't speak to anyone?
No.
No, that's fine. There have been a number of emails floating around the last few days. Can you please? Yes?
Sorry, Chair. We've gone on to site visits. I need to declare my site visits to the same as Claire, Councillor Whiteman's, to Lillington and to Berwick Close.
Thank you. I'll now get on to the emails. I'm determined to get there. There's been a number of emails floating around from various people, including the MP, which can you all declare if you've received emails? Okay, more difficult question. Can anyone indicate if they've actually responded to any email?
I acknowledge receipt.
That's all right. That's okay. Minutes. Confirm the minutes of Planning Committee meeting held on 11th December 2024. Those in favour?
I have
Yeah.
a correction. I think in minute number 89 it refers to an objection received from Warwick Town Council, whereas in fact this was a site in Kenilworth, so I assume it should be
Kenilworth Town Council. Yeah. We'll correct that. So, and then you're proposing acceptance of minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. A seconder, please. All those in favour of accepting the minutes? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now down to business. The procedure for each application will be as follows. Each application will have a presentation from a planning officer. This is followed by registered speakers who will be invited to address the committee. I must ask that all speakers stick to their allotted time. Please can all speakers speak directly into the microphones and if necessary move the microphones closer to you to ensure there are no devices in the way of the microphone. This will enable you to be clearly heard both here and on YouTube. Following registered speakers, the committee will then debate the application. During the debate, members, including myself, may well raise technical questions and issues to which the planning officers or advisors may need to respond. and I will normally invite them to do so. Please can I remind everyone that no officer or councillor will be permitted to address the committee without my permission. The committee will then make its decision based on the information within the report, any representations at the meeting and the content of its debate. Once the decision is made, I will announce it after the vote. For the benefit of visitors attending the committee, all applications will be decided in accordance with the current National Planning Policy Framework and the Council's adopted local plan policies, which set out a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless there are material planning considerations that indicate otherwise. Applications are considered against policies containing local neighbourhood development plans that have been approved following a public referendum. Applications that accord with the local plan will usually be permitted. Applications must only be refused where there are valid planning reasons for doing so. This will help to avoid legal challenges against decisions and avoid unnecessary legal costs to the council and council taxpayer. Please note that I've already agreed that if needed, the meeting will adjourn to a suitable point around 2 hours into the meeting to allow for a comfort break. Finally, whilst I and all the committee members fully appreciate the importance of the decision being made this evening and that they may well generate strong feelings, I take this opportunity to remind everyone to remain calm and courteous at all times. Members, can I check that you've all seen the update report which came out this morning? Okay, now getting down to business. Agenda item 5, W/23/1178, land south of Westham Lane, Barford, has been withdrawn from the committee. So we now move on to agenda item 7, which is W/24/1116, 23 Newnham Road, Lillington. Planning officer will set out the scene and deliver a presentation on the application.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is an application at number 23 Newnham Road, and it's for the erection of a two-storey side extension, single-storey front and rear extension following the demolition of an existing single-storey garage and storage room. This slide shows the site location plan with the site edged in red, and then a slide showing an aerial image of the site, again outlined in red, with this image indicating the positioning of the site within the wider street scene. The aerial image is also helpful in illustrating the overarching character of the street scene, this being the presence of semi-detached properties with well-established breaks between each pair at first floor level. The following slides will help to give you an indication of the existing street scene. So you've got the top left image there, the traditional arrangement of properties and that regular spacing at first floor level, and then the bottom left image as well, showing the pairs and the spaces in between at first floor, and then the top right showing two-storey side extensions, and then the bottom right as well showing a first floor side extension that's set in from the boundary. This next slide shows examples of extensions that are of a similar style to what's proposed within the application, and you can see that these extensions are set back from at first floor level from the front facade and slightly set down. And then this brings us on to the existing and proposed elevations of the current scheme. As set out within the report, the scheme fails to accord with the guidance in terms of within the residential design guide, in terms of the lack of set down and set back as shown within those previous images of other sites. And then I've just got the proposed, the existing floor and roof plans here, and then followed by the proposed floor and roof plans, which show how there's no setback at first floor level, and then also the fact that there's only a 0.2 metre distance away from the shared boundary with the neighbouring property. So again, that's something that's contrary to the Residential Design Guide SPD, which states that it should be 1 metre. And then I've just got some following images of the application property itself. So this is just from the front elevation, and then here from the rear elevation as well. So by coming to within 1 metre of the shared boundary, the clear perception of separation between the properties that's currently there is considered to be lost, and that is obviously, as I've set out, a key characteristic of the street scene. And then here I'll just run through some schemes that have recently been permitted within Newnham Road that have been in accordance with the guidance set out within the SPD. So this application's been set back at first floor level was set down, and is at first floor level is 1 metre away from the shared boundary. And then this application at 32 Newnham Road, which was approved, and you can see that it's set back at first floor, set down as well. And then here at 19 Newnham Road as well. And then just to summarise the main points, the proposed two-storey side extension contravenes 3 key design principles that are within the Residential Design Guide SPD. The first floor element lies within approximately 0.2 metres of the neighbouring boundary, and that results in the creation of a terracing effect, reducing the existing openness and spacing, which is a key feature of the established character of this street scene. The extension is neither set down or set back in accordance with the SPD, and is subsequently not resident subservient addition that respects the character and appearance of the original dwelling house. And within the support comments that have been received, a common theme is centred around the personal circumstances of the applicant. However, this is not a material planning consideration, so holds limited weight in the overall planning balance. So with this in mind, the proposal is contrary to the SPD, Local Plan BE1, Policy BE1 and Policy RLS4 of the Royal Leamington Spa Neighbourhood Plan, and is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have 2 speakers, starting with Mr. Richard Rowe, the applicant. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, committee councillors. Thank you for your time. Personal circumstances, yeah. 18 months ago, I suffered an RTA and was paralysed completely from the chest down. It took 8 months ready to come home, and it was immediately apparent that the home was not fit for purpose. Our home has 1 tiny bathroom, large steps to every entrance. In order for me to access the first floor, we had to put a stair lift in. Stair lifts are great for elderly, not really suitable for paraplegic people. The seat's precarious, dangerous. I have fallen off a couple of times. Yeah, a delightful image. That was nearly 3 months ago. The skin's still broken and damaged. That can kill a wheelchair user because of the constant pressure, danger for sores, etc. My wheelchair, again, cannot fit around the end of our bed. I cannot open the wardrobe door to get in due to lack of space. We also had to remove the bathroom door in order to fit me into the bathroom in a chair. We are living without a bathroom door. As with all paraplegics, I have a paralysed bowel and bladder. I have to pass a catheter 5 to 6 times a day just to stay alive, and empty my bowels using my fingers twice a day. Delightful. I'm supposed to do this on a special wheelchair over the toilet, and then wash on the same chair over a toilet. I can't do this because there's no room to wheel the chair over the loo, and the shower is in the bath. Instead, I have to use a toilet seat over the bath. It's dangerously high in order for me to lift myself onto it. And I have to empty my bowels into a bucket. There is no dignity in that. There is no dignity left at home. I have no toilet, no door on my bathroom, no accessible shower. I cannot even reach my own clothes. A minimum of 7 transfers are required to get me from bed to bathroom, complete my bowel care, dress and get downstairs. Each one requiring me to lift my own body weight, unassisted, with shoulder joints that are not really suitable for that, which they're not designed to do. Once downstairs, I can't risk going upstairs again, so I have to catheterise for the rest of the day in the kitchen and tip the contents down the kitchen sink. Delightful. Needless to say, I get disturbed every now and again with family people walking in. Again, the lack of dignity. Our washing machine and dryer are in the garage, which I can't get at because it's down a step. In the event of a bowel accident or urine overflow, which is quite likely, I can't even wash my own clothes or bedding. Our request for planning permission requires a 3 metre wide 2-storey extension to provide bare essentials. A small
Need drawer remarks for close, please.
drawers. Ground floor would be level in order I can get into. Because we've lived there for 20 odd years, I have a support group, a support network I have my home, my community, my life is based there. I implore you to pass the... Oh yeah,
Thank you.
This is what we're arguing about.
that's a
1
metre.
metre,
That's a metre.
the width of his
So-
wheelchair.
The width of my chair, the width of my shoulders. That's what I'm asking for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Second speaker is Councillor Phil Kohler. District Councillor supporting, 5 minutes.
Very much, Chair. As detailed by the Planning Officer, this application falls short of the Residential Design Guide SPD in 2 ways. This is material consideration, which tips the planning balance against approval. It is my strong view that the benefits of this application in providing a wheelchair accessible property in an area close to shops and a brand new medical centre on an estate where there are currently no such properties outweighs these concerns, and I hope you will agree. So it is considered that it could result in the creation of a terracing effect, as the second floor of the property would be 20 centimetres from the boundary. However, if you look at the street scene, the property next door is not another semi-detached, it is a detached property, which is approximately 1.5 metres from the shared boundary, and the current owners of this property have submitted a supportive comment. If a future owner of number 21, that's the detached property to the side, wishes to extend that property, it is much more likely that that development would be on the other side of the property, and then therefore any potential terracing effect is very unlikely to ever come about. Secondly, the extension is not considered to represent a subservient addition to the property. It is clear from the work that the applicant's architect has undertaken that it is not possible to change the layout of this property to meet the design guide and still be wheelchair friendly. The architect has provided me with the following explanation. The extension design has been prepared to adhere to Part M, Volume 1 of the Building Regulations, which ensures that wheelchair accessible living has been achieved. Circulation distances and turning circles of wheelchairs have been built into the design so as to integrate with the vertical lift and accessible washing facilities. If the first floor level of the extension were to be set in 1 metre from the side boundary or back from the front of the property, so to be subservient, this would eradicate the opportunity to adhere to the spatial requirements set out in Part M of the Building Regulations. It is clear from the drawings that the circulation space around the bed and the lift on the first floor would simply not be achievable, and this would be the case if the first floor were to be set in by only 0.5 metre, let alone 1 metre. So therefore the key question of the committee this evening is, are there any material considerations in favour of this application that compensate for it not meeting all of the design guide to tip the planning balance in favour of granting the application? I will say at this point that official planning documentation is silent on how domestic properties should be retrofitted to allow for wheelchair access. For example, the latest version of the NPPF document has just 4 references to disability, 2 of which are in the glossary. The government has also published a guide titled Housing for Older and Disabled People, but that is silent on domestic applications. Our local plan and residential design guide do not provide clear-cut guidance for these circumstances either. So, starting with local plan policy H4, securing a mix of housing, it states in the explanatory text, national planning policy requires local planning authorities to plan for a mix of housing, blah, 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 to address the needs of different groups in the community, including the elderly and people with disabilities. Likewise, Design Guide Policy HS1, Healthy, Safe and Inclusive Communities, paragraph A, states, support will be given to proposals which provide homes and developments which are designed to meet the needs of older people and those with disabilities. As a result of these policies, new build estates have a proportion of bungalows, whilst many established areas that predate them, such as Newnham Road, do not. Meanwhile, Design Guide Policy BE1, Layout and Design, paragraph O, states, development proposals will be expected to demonstrate that they meet the highest standards of accessibility and inclusion for potential users, regardless of disability, age or gender. One of the questions it says is necessary to be asked is, has the design taken into account the accessibility to and within buildings by wheelchair users? None of the properties on the Newnham Road estate meet this element of the design guide either. Retrofitting 23 Newnham Road to be suitable for disabled residents would be a small but positive step for our housing mix. It will be an additional home that is suitable for wheelchair users in an area that is very suitable for them, but currently without. And that should count as a material consideration in favour of granting this application. So to conclude, you may be concerned that granting this application will set a precedent, and you would be right, it will. But it will not set a precedent that will allow all future applicants to ignore the terracing and subservient rules in the design guide. Rather, it will set the precedent that improving a property to make it accessible for a disabled person using a wheelchair is a material planning consideration. That has to be a good thing. If you are concerned that a future owner might remove the lift, for example, meaning it is no longer wheelchair accessible, please consider if a condition retaining the lift would mitigate that risk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll first of all call on Nigel Bell from legal standing of personal circumstances.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just reiterate what the case officer said in the summary, that I'm afraid the personal circumstances are not material planning considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you heard what's been said, and you've seen what's in the report saying it doesn't comply with a number of policies. And I don't think there's any question about that. So I'd like you to try and focus on what, if you want to approve this, we can put in which does not create a precedent, because creating a precedent is going to be the problem. Councillor Gifford.
Thank you, Chair. Listened carefully to what the applicant and indeed the ward councillor has said just now, but also I did spend some time looking at an application that was put in 2014 at number 42 Princes Street, Leamington Spa, where a house was built in the garden. Again, it's something that shouldn't have been, went against, in order to produce a house that was able to accommodate someone who was completely wheelchair bound. That was granted planning permission in 2014. It took a while because it had to go, there were 3 applications to get it through, but it was granted eventually. And I have to say that I think the exception in this particular case is that there aren't the number of houses that are designed or have been built or altered to really take into account wheelchair use, i.e. the wide doors, the ability to turn and so on. And so it's not just the personal circumstances of the applicant, it's, as the ward councillor so eloquently put it, it's the need to have housing stock that is usable by wheelchair users, particularly paraplegic wheelchair users. In all areas, I mean, not just in Princes Street, which is right on the edge of Newbold Common, but also in Newnham Road, everywhere in the district. We should be encouraging this sort of development where possible, because there is the real need, and it's not a need that's going to go away. I would argue it's a need that is going to stay with us and may even grow. So I would argue that we should be approving this application because there is a need for this type of mix of housing. And I think that was well put by the ward councillor. And whilst I appreciate that the planning officer has done a perfectly good job in terms of arguing the aesthetic case and the planning rules and regulations, I do think that this is exceptional. This is not somebody putting in a cinema room or play area or whatever. This is making sure that this particular applicant, but also anybody else wishing to live in that area in due course, would be able to, there would be that house available. But I would hope that it would set a precedent that means that where there is a need to make wheelchair accessible homes or alterations, that could be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a bit confused as to how this does actually set a precedent. If we're considering allowing a house to be adapted for disabled use, then that should be... It doesn't set a precedent where someone who's not disabled can come and do it. I don't see how that does that. Maybe someone could offer some clarification on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think there are very particular circumstances in this case, and were members to come to the decision to grant planning permission, it would be really important to make it clear the reasons for that decision. So I think in many ways you're right. The proposal wouldn't be setting a precedent in general terms. I think that the key area for members to focus on is the sort of legal advice that you've had, which is that in general terms, personal circumstances wouldn't normally be a material consideration. I think that's the bigger challenge.
Councillor Mrs. Reitman.
Thank you. So, as I said, I undertook a site visit this afternoon. I looked at the applicant's property and the immediately neighbouring properties and the wider street scene, and took quite a lot of photos, which I've looked at subsequently. Looking at the summary of main points, we have text here that refers to approval of the application, reducing the existing openness and spacing that's a key feature of the established character of the street scene, and again the proposals being referred to as a subservient addition that wouldn't respect the character and appearance of the original dwelling house. When I visited this afternoon, what struck me immediately was the complete lack of uniformity and consistency within the street scene, both in terms of the openness and spacing between properties. And as we've already alluded to, there are differing styles of properties in this street. So I saw a detached house, I saw multiple semi-detached properties, and I observed multiple differing styles of existing extensions, which didn't seem to me to respect the character and appearance of the original dwelling house in a way in which the applicant's proposals wouldn't. And my overriding impression from my visit was that from certain angles, if you look at the street scene, you might be of the mind that a terracing effect could already be created because of the lack of consistency of spacing between the differing styles of properties, and that, as I said, there are manifold pre-existing sizes and styles of extensions, and so to my mind, where we say in the summary of main points that the existing openness and spacing that's a key feature of the established character of this street scene would be in some way reduced if the proposal was to be approved. I don't agree with that statement based on what I've observed, and neither that approval would be disrespectful to the character and appearance of the original dwelling house in a way in which existing additions are respectful. I can't see a difference between those. So it was just to offer my observations against some of the main points for recommending refusal that I don't agree with based on what I've observed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you. As I understand it, the main reasons for refusal are lack of set down, lack of setback of the extension, and the proximity of the boundary of the extension to the boundary of the property. If we discount the proximity of the extension to the boundary of the property on the grounds that it's there's a much wider gap in the neighbouring property, can I ask whether there was discussion between officers and the architects about the possibility of some slight redesigns which would allow for the set down and the set back by some sort of reconfiguration that would actually bring it within the design guidelines on those two aspects, and in accordance with some of the very attractive extensions that you show as examples, and whether it be possible to incorporate the clearly required disability access facilities within a slightly amended design that would also accord with our design guide.
Yeah, thank you. I had been in discussions with the applicant's agents a couple of months ago now, setting out the reasons that I've set out here, so they've remained unchanged, and they were going to look into potential redesigns, but they weren't forthcoming. But yeah, I did make it clear from the start what the reasons were for why we couldn't support, and they were looking into it, but it didn't come to fruition in the end.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I don't wish to debate whether or not this is in breach of policy B or B1 or the residential design guide, but I notice from the list of relevant policies that are mentioned in the report, the two policies to which Councillor Kohler referred powerfully, H4 and HS1, were not considered as being relevant here. Now, I don't know whether that was an oversight or whether it's because it's an extension of an existing property, they just are not considered relevant, but they are in the local plan, and I just wonder what weight as members of the planning committee we should be attaching to those policies.
For householder developments, those policies that have been set out, they don't form part of our assessment. So in this case, what's been set out is what we assessed the case against, and they were the relevant policies for householder extensions. So yeah, that's why they weren't included within the list of policies.
If I may just come back on that, Chair. I can't see any reference, though, in the local plan, and it's the local plan, it's not a design guide principle, it's in the local plan that says that these policies do not apply to household extensions.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. I think, as Thomas has explained, the policies that are referenced in the report are considered to be the policies that that would carry the most weight in determining this application. However, members this evening are the decision makers, and it is also for members to determine what weight they may or may not want to apply to other policies.
Councillor Cron.
I just had a couple of things. Firstly, Mr. Senior said that personal circumstances were not a material consideration, but on the Planning and Access for Disabled People Good Practice Guide from the government, it says disabled persons' access is a material consideration. So I just wanted some clarity on that.
Chairman, I can confirm access to a property is a material consideration, but not the personal circumstances of the people who live in the property. It's a slight distinction. So
Okay.
yes, access from the highway into a property.
So disabled persons' access would be paramount, I would
It is
say.
a material consideration, yes.
And the second thing I wanted to say was I wanted to congratulate the architect because, just for context, I am an architect. I'm familiar with Part M, so the disability arrangements for design, and also the metric handbook, which is the architect's Bible. And so I'm very familiar with the fact that a turning circle for a standard wheelchair is 1.5 metres, and they have done a very, very good job of providing that space internally so that minimum requirements, but keeping it as small as possible on the outside. And I've had a look at the lay of the land and the plan, and I can see that they've done an extremely thorough and thoughtful job here. And I just want everyone to consider that if this isn't granted, then what should the applicant do? Do they then have to go through the council to find somewhere else to live? Does the council have to provide that? Do they have to provide all the special equipment that goes with that move? Whereas with this, they can stay where they are. They have their support network. They just need to tweak the house, but it has to work. Thank you.
Councillor Whiteman.
Thank you. Some of the points have actually just been covered. I mean, what I'm really sort of probing here is the balancing exercise we've got to do. I'm obviously hearing loud and clear the legal advice that personal circumstances, you said carry no weight, and I think the planning officer said carry little weight. I think that, you know, that I'd like to think as a panel of people, we never completely dismiss human factors from the decisions. I think otherwise we do come up with some quite bad decisions, I think, if we completely put aside the human. But the H4 point that has been put forward most eloquently by the ward councillor, Councillor Kohler, to me, I think here is one of these situations where I think perhaps it wouldn't carry the weight normally, but there are quite exceptional circumstances in this case. The housing need here seems little option of actually meeting it, particularly in the same way elsewhere. And while I don't think it's in dispute that some of the principles have been breached, it does also strike me that in the same road there have been other sort of minor indiscretions here and there, and we often on this panel do see minor deviations. It does strike me when we are exercising that planning balance that in exceptional cases we can apply different weights, you know, to what is right in that particular circumstance. I don't think we are creating a precedent, but I think, you know, the human factors behind this do mean that we need to consider very carefully here what the housing need is, and, you know, what are the options if we say no to this.
I think what we need to be looking at, if we can, is how can we make this a distinctive application, unlike others, for extending housing for anyone up to boundaries, ignoring the roof line and everything else, because that does make a difference. And I think we need to be coming up with some reason, and I know personal circumstances don't apply, but I'm sure there's a form of words that we can get that do apply. So I just ask people to think about that and try and get that different one in. I think the sense I get is everyone wants to approve it. What we don't want to do is set precedents. And if we can get some wording around why it's being done, disability access. I mean, the access was interesting from Councillor Cron, that it's access into the building, the first bit, but what about the rest of it? So therefore, maybe words around the rest of it could be brought in as being a distinctive reason. So just ask people to think about that. Martin Looker.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to precedent a little bit. Doesn't Leamington Town Hall have a disabled ramp at the front of the building? And that's a somewhat historic building. And keep in mind, this application is not in a conservation area, so that should carry less weight for keeping it the way it is.
The ramp at the front of the town hall went through English Heritage and a lot of other people before it turned up with what it was. Town Council wished to have stone ramps as part of the building, and they had to have wooden ones which just touched the building. It was bonkers, but that's the way it was.
Interesting. Thank you.
Anyone else got their thinking hats on? Councillor Phelps.
I think it's down to us putting more weight on numbers 1 and 2, than the B ones. Sorry, I've written them down and I can't see what that was. HS1. We're putting more weight on that than we are on and the officer rightly went to the, what would normally happen in an application. So I think that's that with access within the building due to disabilities, paraplegic especially because it's, other people, because people will say, well, my granny is in a wheelchair, why can't we do it? But granny might be able to get out of the wheelchair where our applicant can't. It's not easy to do that. So that, to me, although it's personal circumstances, makes it a different application to me wanting to have an annex because granny's with us. So I think we've got to concentrate on H2 and give that more weight than the planning officer is giving to the B one. That's in our opinion. Somebody will put that more eloquently than I have.
Councillor Kennedy.
I would also suggest that the breaches of the residential design guide are fairly minor in terms of the rest of the street scene around there, and indeed, if assuming that the facing and the construction and materials that are used are in keeping with the rest of the street, I would want to argue that those are fairly minor breaches and therefore could carry less weight. That's the proposal.
I think you're probably right, but what you've got to think about is somebody else comes in with a planning application just to extend their house and they've gone to the boundaries and to the roof line. It's how do you stop that? So what's distinctive about this one? That seems to be mobility and access. And I think that's where we need to be going down to make it distinctive for this one.
Chair, I was just going to ask members if it might just be helpful to put the slides up again that showed the extension in the street scene, just so that, just to support members, help members in sort of thinking that aspect through, and indeed the point that you've just raised, Chair.
Could you go back 2 slides, please? The colour where we had the 4 squares, the 4 rectangles. That's number 18 and 20, I think. On the top right. That looks to be built right on the boundary.
Is that the left that you're referring to the left-hand property of the top right image?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the left one or the right one, but they're both very close together.
Yeah, so with the...
If it's the left one...
That's to the boundary at ground floor. Yeah, which is...
And on the right one, if it's the right one, they're built right up to the boundary on the second floor. So what I'm saying here is actually, I think you have a precedent in the street scene on this particular road where it's been built very, very close to the boundary, similar to this application. I think that's 18 and 20, and I looked at it in Google Maps earlier on.
Chair, we're just going to pull up photographs of the application site just for members to see that.
So is the extension taking half that space? Do we know from the drawing?
So this is the existing floor and roof plan, so you can see the garage that's set to be demolished, and it's just on that footprint. So unfortunately from my images, You can't see the outline of the garage because of the van in front, but yeah, so it goes, that's the kind of store that connects to the flat roof garage, so it'll be going to the edge of that flat roof garage, which is shown on the existing plans there.
So would it not be a fair assumption that on that photograph the gap between the properties is half is one property and the other half is the other? So this extension would be going to the boundary of their own property.
Yeah, that's right, Chair. And what we would normally look for, as set out in the residential design guide, is that bit of a set-in from the boundary, a set back, certainly at first floor level, and extensions at the side to be set down. And that is predominantly, I think, to give that sense of subservience of extensions, but also to minimise, I think, the risk of that terracing effect in the street scene. And in this particular case, were the neighbouring property to want to build a similar extension coming close to the boundary, then that would be heading towards that kind of terracing effect that that the residential design guide is designed to try and avoid.
Isn't that somewhat of a hypothetical? We don't approve this because somebody else might do something else in the future?
I got there first.
Yeah, it is hypothetical.
So is that a consideration we need to take account?
The approach is set out in the guidance just to apply generally across the board, so that, you know, to avoid that situation. But you're right, Councillor, none of us know what the neighbour may or may not wish to do.
And if I could then ask in turn a hypothetical question to you, if the boundary happened to be 1 metre towards number 21, i.e. away from the applicant, and that created an extra 1 metre space, would then the 1 metre problem disappear? Because so 23's boundary moves 1 metre to the left, and then the 1 metre boundary problem disappears.
It may do, yes, but that's not the situation.
Hypothetical, as I say, but I think it does say that we've got some rules here that we're applying, and I understand exactly where the seniors come from here, but we are applying rules that actually in slightly different circumstances wouldn't apply. But you still have the applicant will be able to build the building right up to where he wants to.
Yeah, buy a strip of land and you've got rid of the problem. Coming back to what we can say, I'll pick up in Bill, is that the changes to the design are such to enable wheelchair access around the property, which would be impossible without. Now, whether that is strong enough to say we've got a particular reason for this, it's uninhabitable by the current people unless we provide these differences which are judged as being necessary because of the wheelchair access within the property, whereas anyone else who comes forward wanting to build out, we could still say no because there's no particular reason for it, maybe. I'll call in Councillor Gifford.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Councillor Kohler made a very good point about HS1, where in our local plan it talks about healthy, safe and inclusive communities. The potential for creating healthy, safe and inclusive communities will be taken into account when considering all development proposals. Support will be given to proposals which provide homes to development which are designed to meet the needs of older and those with disabilities. it doesn't say what sort of disabilities, but this is obviously at the extreme end, provide energy efficient housing, design and layout to minimise potential for crime and so on and so on. But the very first paragraph is provide homes and developments which are designed to meet the needs of older people and those with disabilities. This is under HS1, healthy, safe and inclusive communities. I would argue that we're trying to make sure that if we propose that we approve this application on the basis that this overrides the aesthetic element of the street scene, the effect on the street scene, which is relatively, in my opinion, this is so much more important, making sure that we do have these homes available. And it also talks about making sure that there's provide good access to local shops, employment opportunities, services, schools, community facilities. And I would argue it's not that far from the Nillington, the new health hub in Nillington, and so that's also something that should be deliver and contribute to new and improved health services. So I think we're going to approve it. We just wanted we wanted to have a good reason so that somebody can't say, well, it's important for me to have my home cinema. It doesn't matter if it goes up to the boundary. That I think HS1 is a good reason, and I think nobody has suggested that we refuse the application, and the committee so far. Thank you.
Councillor Phelps.
Thank you, Councillor Gifford, a bit more clear than mine. I would like to see, though, if we do approve this, that the lift has to stay, because if that is taken out, should the applicant then no longer live there, we have not got the accessible home that we want for our area. So if we can condition, if we are going to approve it, can we condition that, you know, the lift is, you know, an integral part of that house from the moment it's built and should not be removed? I'm not sure what the legal right is, as it's an indoor thing. Nigel, I don't know if you can tell me. Can we put a condition to say that the lift is integral part of the house and cannot be removed? Well, certainly that having to come back to planning.
Chairman, I mean, it would be open to the committee to impose such condition. I'm just concerned that it would be almost impossible to monitor and enforce.
We really need to have the reason for why we grant it. Councillor Kennedy.
I would like to propose that we grant on the basis of the reasons that you outlined, Chair, shortly before, to which I saw Mr. Fisher nodding, on the basis that the benefits of accessibility, as brought to our attention by Councillor Cron, and we can get the wording exactly on that, and for all the other community benefits that members have discussed, outweigh the what we consider less than substantial harm to the street scene.
I'd rather leave the word less out. Councillor Whiteman.
I mean, I really was going to sort of say along the lines of Councillor Kennedy there, but I think the balancing act here does justify it. I think for the reasons Councillor Gifford so eloquently put out, I think there is good reason here to give more weight, you know, for the accessibility reasons. And I think the impact here is perhaps less than we would normally consider it. I think it's quite exceptional in this particular case that we're dealing with breaches and yet all we have is expressions of support. I mean, I don't think that's usual, is it? It's quite exceptional. It shows this case is quite an individual and unusual one. And to me, I think, therefore, this is a balancing act where we are perhaps applying more weight because of the accessibility reasons set out, and perhaps applying slightly less weight to the impact here, given the fact there is a precedent in the same street, and given the fact that there are no objections, only support.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I think there are a number of different aspects to this, and providing this advice on the assumption, the feeling that members want to grant planning permission here, which is absolutely understandable. The first element is around notwithstanding the fact that there are elements of the proposal that don't accord with the residential design guidance. There's an issue there that a couple of councillors, including yourself, Councillor Watton, I think yourself, Councillor Kennedy, have touched on around the reality of the impact of the design in the street scene. So if members are looking to bring together, if you like, the reasoning for granting planning permission, I think members' views on that sort of impact or lack of in the street scene, notwithstanding non-compliance with the residential design guide, I think that's an important element to include. The element around a particular design that enables access into and around the building, I think goes without saying. And members, you might think about, we've talked a little bit about policy H4 and policy HS1, which in some ways are kind of saying the same sort of thing. They're directed well, certainly H4 is directed at new residential development en masse coming forward. But members might want to reflect on whether policy H4, which does clearly, and HS1, which does clearly reference the need for a range of different property types and designs to meet the needs of older people and people with disabilities. Members might want to reflect on whether that provision set out in that policy is actually being achieved or not, which might help to justify, a grant of permission for this particular proposal. And then finally, if members are considering granting planning permission, think about whether there might be a condition that can be imposed around materials. And I know we impose conditions around materials as a matter of course, but in this particular case, looking in a bit more detail to try and find a way in which finished materials might be used to offset, if you like, some of the impacts of not complying with the residential design guide. I'm seeing Councillor Kennedy nodding, so I'm hoping that's made some sense, but those are just my suggestions to try and help members.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Hi. As someone who is classed as disabled myself, albeit not mobility issues, I find it really disappointing that we're clutching at straws here to try and find something to allow someone to live their life. So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Fisher, about, HS1 is set out for new developments. I just think, this is an exceptional circumstance. We as a committee have the right to kind of see what we think is best and have that vote. And I think in this very particular circumstance, we can kind of apply this for this extension. And I think something needs to be looked at for this policy so that in the future, when extensions come forward for people who find themselves in this position, there is something we can do about it. So I'm happy to second Councillor Kennedy and for the reasons you set out, add in HS1, and I'm happy to consider adding some conditions for materials.
Does that include my comments? I think you did.
I think so.
Right.
I think so, Chair. That's very important.
Anyone else? Councillor Phillips.
I think Councillor Davidson's just made a very important point there, and I think we ought to have a note somewhere to whoever is relevant in the planning team on the residential design guide that we're now going to be revising with the new local plan. I was quite surprised when I went through this to see how little reference there is to people with disability needs, etc., in the residential design guide. And I think the four of us who did this when we approved the plan, 8 years ago, is something we missed out. And I think we do need something to in the new plan that addresses existing properties and the requirements for disabled, not just access, but disabled living. And I think we should make a note to that effect to the relevant planning officer. I'm not sure if it's you, Mr. Fisher, or Mr. Clark, or whoever it is, but I'd like to see that note go forward.
Chair, if I may, just for you. So we've actually had a proposal and seconder, so we need to kind of deal with that. We haven't actually said if you wanted to add a condition, because that wasn't on the first proposal. So we either need to vote for the original proposal, or we can ask Councillor Kennedy to revise his original proposal and get that seconded again.
Can you? No, I can remember. This is, as I understand what Councillor Phillips is saying, this is not actually part of the approval process, but it's a note for the planning officers. It's not actually a condition of this application. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So my proposal stands as I articulated rather ineffectively, and which Mr. Fisher helpfully fleshed out, plus the comments of the chair, if that makes sense.
It's all recorded, so we should be all right.
Sorry, so is that with the note as well that Councillor Phillips proposed?
I guess with the note, yes. Yeah.
Chair, so there would be a need for planning conditions on a grant of planning permission, if that is the way that what the committee decides. Question for you, Chair, question for all members as well. What we've done before in this sort of scenario is delegate authority to the chair in conjunction with the head of service, albeit through myself and colleagues, to agree that with yourself. If members were inclined to add a condition that might look to see how we can use facing materials, I think that it would be helpful for members to specifically include that in the proposal.
I'm happy to conclude that in the proposal, since I mentioned it earlier that I think materials should be, there should be a condition to try and get the materials to fit in with the street scene as best as possible.
Okay, anyone else? All those in favour of the proposal to grant with the long list of bits and pieces? Thank you, that's clearly carried unanimous. /0845. 15 Berwick Close, Woodlows Park.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to a property 15 Berwick Close, Woodlows Park in Warwick, which is outlined in red on the slide currently on the screen, and an aerial image there, just to orientate members as to the location of the property, which we can see is on a corner within a residential area. And as you'll see from photographs which are to come, a residential area which is in overall terms quite open plan in nature, and you'll see that on a number of the corner properties, and you can see that to a degree on these properties here as well. Corner property there, which is relatively open too. So application site identified there, and we can see that the site raises away, or rises rather, away from the road. And again, as you'll be aware, and as you'll see in a moment, the proposal is the removal of a lean-to extension on the road-facing side of the property, and a replacement extension which extends further out towards the boundary of the property with the highway. So there are just a few slides of the property and the surroundings, just to give members a sense of the overall area. So on this slide, the application property is on the right, and you can see hopefully the sense of openness that we're seeing as we look down the road, and again just the general open plan nature of the area, which is shown again in this slide. Application property there, looking as heading towards the brow of the slope or the hill. Application property there again. So in this slide, this is the application property. There's another property here, number 1, Berwick Close, which has had some extensions previously. Circumstances there are a little bit different because there is a first floor infilling extension that was approved there. However, in that particular case, there was already an historic garage in this location here. And members will be aware that there isn't going to be a single property or proposal where the circumstances are the same as any other. So again, on this slide, that is the application site there. This is number 1. I'm just flagging this because I think it was mentioned in some of the correspondence that members may have seen. So I felt, given its proximity to the application site, it would be helpful for members to see that. And turning now to the proposals, this is the existing site plan showing a lean-to extension here. This is the proposed site plan showing a more substantive brick-built extension, which is wider. It's broadly speaking as wide again as the the extension that's in place. Existing and proposed elevations here. So this is looking at the front of the property with the existing lean-to extension, and then the proposed frontage with the extension shown here, proposed here. This is the side elevation looking towards the existing scenario, and then the proposed scenario, and we'll see that as well as coming closer to the road, so taking up more of that corner plot. The proposal, the extension is also higher with a pitched roof. Then this is the other side elevation and the rear elevation, which shows again the similar nature of the changes. Perhaps the key element to look at here is the lean-to extension shown there and the new extension shown here. So that's a summary of the main points, which of course are set out in detail in the officer's report, which recommends that members refuse to grant planning permission, essentially because of the impact of the proposed extension on the openness of that corner plot and thereby the character of the surrounding area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have two speakers. First one is Oliver Jacks, and you're sharing your time with the second speaker, so you have a minute and a half.
Thank you, Chair. The contentious point is evidently Local Plan Policy B1 in relation to corner plots as determined by the Residential Design Guide. I think if you had a copy of the slide 1 on my...
It should come up in a second.
Okay. Can we pause my time while this comes up? Thank you. It's getting there. Okay, thank you. So, as we can see, the guide is implying that substantial means all the way to the boundary. As such, I believe this application does not substantially reduce the openness of the corner plot, and I think to claim otherwise is overzealous. The proposed extension replaces the existing lean-to and appears no more prominent than the current structure, and is actually less intrusive, taking into account the lines of sight. So that's slide 2. Thank you. There's a minimal increase in scale of the overall floor area of the property, so less than actually 10%. I believe the planned landscaping and planting actually makes for a more attractive street scene than is there currently. Let's see, slide 3, please. So in terms of setting an undesirable precedent, this proposal is significantly more modest than the recently approved planning application for a side extension at number 1 Berwick Close, as we've seen mentioned, which is directly opposite and also a corner plot. Slide 4, please. Okay, so it's the area in yellow, number 1. The application for number 1, determined in July of last year, so under the current local plan and residential design guide, was recommended by officers for approval, even though the side extension encroached 3 metres further towards the site boundary.
You've had your minute and a half.
Including pauses for...
Yes. I call on, I think it's Bertine, is that correct?
That's correct.
Bertine Smith.
I'm an architect from the Netherlands, wife, mother of 2 children. We've lived in our bungalow for 8 years. To get 1 extra room in a house we love, we submitted a plan for a small extension to replace the lean-to, designed subservient to the existing, conform all relevant policies. Many neighbours and the councillors support the plan, but it's been a chaotic procedure. The planning officer who visited the site wrote in her report, minor extension with limited visual harm and spatial impact, which appears in keeping with the character and appearance of the street scene. However, just before the expiry date, the officer stated the extension was located on amenity land from the 1970s and would be refused. Weeks later, another officer sent an inaccurate plan of the Woodlows as proof of the land classification. And she said we needed to change our householders application into a full planning application. After we employed a planning consultant, they finally conceded that they got it all wrong. Amenity land was no longer an issue, full planning application was not required. There was a new concern. Our plan substantially reduces the openness of the corner plot. After making amendments, I thought I had overcome all these issues, but officers put forward a new concern. Our house is on a slope. We were chasing a moving target. The council dismissed all our 14 examples of approved similar side extensions on the woodloads. In the photo images, you can clearly see that there is no effect on the open space. The larger setback even increases the openness of the corner. The extension is only 1.6 meters wider than the lean-to, about the width of that table.
Good timing. Just waiting.
Quite disturbing when trying to listen to the applicant, talking over there.
Shall I do it again?
Yeah, have some of your time.
Yeah, we'll give it you again.
Yes, sorry, Chairman. The lady had asked us to display some slides, which I've got on my screen, and we can't understand why they're not on the big screen.
Where are they now?
On my screen.
And we don't know the reason why they're not up.
No, I'm not sure. We can turn the TV on and plug them in and have them shown on TV.
That would be better than nothing.
Yeah.
Where did you end? I don't know if I should do mine again.
Wait, have you finished yours?
But they didn't hear it because I wouldn't.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, yeah, okay, stick with that.
I think you also had some disturbance. It's not really fair, is it? I keep having issues with uploading our images on the... I forgot to switch it off.
Sorry, Chair. Could also claim that there was some disturbance. Well, no, with there being a distraction about getting the slides up, and it interrupted my flow.
Improve your timing.
Please, Chair, if I may, yes.
Apologies.
Next meeting will be in the town hall, so it's fine. We'll start from the top.
Okay.
Mr. Jacks, you have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The contentious point is evidently local plan BE1 policy, as determined in the design guide, so slide 1. The guide is implying that substantial means all the way to the boundary. As such, I believe this application does not substantially reduce the openness of the corner plot, and I think to claim otherwise is overzealous. The proposed extension replaces the existing lean-to and appears no more prominent than the current structure, and is actually less intrusive taking into account the lines of sight on slide 2. There is a minimal increase to scale of the overall floor area of less than 10%. I believe the planned landscaping and planting actually makes for a more attractive street scene than is there currently. Slide 3. In terms of setting an undesirable precedent, this proposal is significantly more modest than the recent approved plan at number 1 Berwick. The application there, slide 4, was determined in July of last year under the current local plan and design guide and was recommended for approval. The officer's report concluded on that application that the proposed development complies with local plan policy B1 and the residential design guide. I therefore struggle to see how the approved application number 1 is materially different to this application for number 15. I fully understand the importance of the traditional openness of street scene on the Woodlows, which helps to make the estate such an attractive place to live. However, I consider this application is not detrimental to either the street scene nor the openness. Yet I respectfully understand that is for the determination of planning committee members to reach their own view and make a decision. Thank you.
That was faster. Well done.
But without the slides.
Okay, well, you've seen the slides already? Yes. Yes, okay.
Mr. Ian Smith, 1.5 minutes.
I'm an architect from the Netherlands, a wife, a mother of 2 children. We've lived in our bungalow for 8 years. To get 1 extra room in the house we love, we submitted a plan for a small extension to replace the lean-to, designed subservient to the existing, conform all relevant policies. Many neighbours and the councillors support the plan, but it's been a chaotic procedure. The planning officer who visited the site wrote in her report, minor extension with a limited visual harm and spatial impact which appears in keeping with the character and appearance of the street scene. However, just before the expiry date, the officer stated the extension was located on amenity land from the 70s and would be refused. Weeks later, another officer sent an inaccurate plan of the Woodlows as proof of the land classification. And she said we needed to change our household application into a full planning application. After we employed a planning consultant, they finally conceded they got it all wrong. Amenity land was no longer an issue and full planning application was not required. There was a new concern: our plan substantially reduces the openness of the corner plot. After making amendments, I thought I had overcome all these issues, but officers put forward a new concern: our house is on a slope. We were chasing a moving target. The council dismissed all our 14 examples of approved similar site extensions on the Woodlows. In the photo images, you can clearly see there's no effect on the open space. The larger setback even increases the openness around the corner. The extension is only 1.6 meters wider than the lean-to, about the width of that table. Thank you.
That was quicker too. Thank you.
I practiced.
Members. Door rush.
Do we have the extract from the design guidelines showing the corner plot? No. I've seen it on screen once tonight, so it must be somewhere there. That's it. Yeah, can I, thank you, Mr. Fisher, that's exactly what I was after. This particular example here goes right to the edge of the property on figure 8. They're both figure 8s for some reason, but anyway. And but am I right in saying that the proposed extension here does not go right to the corner, right to the edge of the property, and there's about a 1.5 metre gap?
That's absolutely correct, Councillor. Although I would add that what you're looking at here is an artist's impression to give an illustration of the sort of extensions that might not be acceptable in these scenarios. What you're not looking at here is a diagram that shows a specific example of something that isn't acceptable, and anything lesser than that would be acceptable. It's a matter of members' judgment in this particular case as to whether there is a harmful impact on the openness of that corner plot.
Thank you. You answered my second question before I even asked it about the members' judgment. Could we also go to the one where the various sight lines drawn on the... That one. So, if I've understood this correctly, this is saying that I don't know, is that deep purple, dark purple, is the current lean-to, and that therefore the sight line actually is improved from certain angles?
If I've got this right, and Laura to my left might correct me if I haven't, the existing lean-to is this area here.
Including the purple.
Including the purple bit, yes. The proposed extension is this area here. And whilst that diagram may show sight lines, the key consideration for members in officers' view is the impact on the openness of the corner plot.
Councillor Mrs Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. The property is in our district ward, and as Councillor Jakes has alluded to, is an area, Woodlows Park, that is known for its green open spaces. I think it was farm estate land as recently as sort of 1950s, 60s, and it's lucky enough to have a plethora of green spaces, original hedgerows, mature trees, which sometimes are problematic, but which characterise the estate and are one of the reasons why people choose to live there. I note in the summary of main points that we are told that approval of the proposal would significantly reduce the open character of the traditional appearance of the corner plot, giving rise to visual harm. And I just wanted to comment that from my own site visit at the weekend, it strikes me that yes, this is a corner plot, but we have a row of housing descending the slope immediately opposite, and it strikes me that the openness arising from this corner plot is from, I would say, the green lawn in front of it and the open and accessible visual line of sight through to Primrose Hill with its mature trees, and that none of these features which contribute to the openness of this plot would in any way be reduced by the replacement of the existing lean-to with a structure that is marginally bigger, 1.6 metres squared in terms of its footprint, and marginally higher. So I don't agree with the summary of main points where we're told that approval of the proposal would significantly reduce the open character of this particular corner plot or give rise to visual harm. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you. As I understand from what Councillor Phillips comments, basically what we're being asked for here is our judgment. It's not a question of this is 1.2 metres wider than it should be or anything as it was in the previous one. So it's simply a matter of our judgment as to whether this proposal causes visual harm or not. Is that correct?
That is correct. Your officer's judgment is that it does, and that is because it is a structure that extends further out towards the boundary of the property. It's a much more substantive structure than is currently on site. It is also higher and a brick-built structure, which officers consider can only have a greater impact on openness than the existing scenario. However, it is a judgment for members to consider whether they agree or not. Thank you.
Councillor Luckhurst.
Thank you, Chair. Can we go back to the top-down slide, please? Yeah. On the proposed site plan, there's either trees or bushes along the edge. I assume you don't require planning permission for those. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I was just going to...
I don't know whether they're trees
I
or
was
bushes.
just going to go to a photograph. So that's the current scenario.
All right. So you could, in theory, lose the openness anyway, just from if the bush or whatever plant it might be grew up to a certain height. So it wouldn't actually matter about the...
planting and landscaping, although it can have an impact on openness, it's not something that's it's not under planning control.
So if there's the landia, then they're going to grow very tall very quickly. So, but yeah, so my point is just it's the building itself may become irrelevant should the planting be done in a certain way. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question here, as Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Phillips have said, is members' judgment of openness. And I fully accept, having driven around several times around the Woodlows, that actually it is characterised by openness. But here we have, up in Berwick Close, actually, it's a cul-de-sac. I mean, just from where that picture is taken is the head of the cul-de-sac. Nobody goes to or from there unless they live there. Whereas the rest of the site, you could be going from point A outside Woodlows Estate to point B outside Woodlows Estate. I sort of, therefore, don't attach quite so much weight to the question of openness as I do to the fact that actually, at the moment, with all due respect to the applicant, we have a fairly unattractive lean-to shed that's going to be replaced by or it's proposed is going to be replaced by an extension that is set back from the front of the property, albeit that it's set further closer to the road there. It's just a question of whether, in judgment, we can acknowledge the fact that this is in a cul-de-sac.
Councillor Whiteman.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it was a question very much along the same lines, really. I did want to know whether or not we could appropriately take into account that, frankly, the extension as planned looks better, because, I mean, I know the objection is one of openness, but it does look better than the existing lean-to. The second thing I kind of wanted to know, is there any more sort of criteria? Because you mentioned it's a slightly taller, slightly more substantial, but openness, we can exercise our judgment completely on openness, can we? I mean, the view lines do provide openness. It's obviously, it's broader, but it's not quite as long. You know, there are sight lines to the front open space. Just wondered if there's anything further. And I suppose my third question is the precedent that seems to have been set almost across the road. I mean, I know we mentioned there was a historic garage, but to be honest, that one looks almost less open than this one. Is there a reason why we shouldn't be taking that into account as a precedent here, or?
I got your first question, and I got your third question. I didn't quite grasp the second question.
The second question really was, are there any more criteria you can give us? Because all we've seen so far in terms of openness, which I think is the specific objection, is a diagram, one that goes right up to the boundary, one that's further back, and clearly this one's somewhere in between. But there are different factors here. I mean, there are the fact that it's not quite as long, it's a bit broader, the sight lines we've been referred to. Is that completely all of down to our judgment?
It's what we're looking at here, Councillor, I think, is the overall impact of the proposed extension within the surrounding area. We've talked about openness quite a lot because that's one of the key things, I think, and often is one of the key factors to consider on corner plots. But an element of the judgment is also about, you know, the design of an extension relative to what is present at the moment. That clearly is a material factor. And are there any more criteria? Again, there aren't any further criteria that I could express to you because in overall terms, I think you've covered the key areas, but the factors that, you know, one person takes into account in considering openness and whether something's acceptable might be slightly different to the factors that another person might take into account. So, you know, it's for each member to weigh that up in their minds. The reason that there is a recommendation of refusal, though, is around the size and scale and prominence of the extension relative to what's there at the moment on that kind of raised corner plot.
Councillor Phillips.
So I'm reading the refusal reasons here, and I start with the MPPF places significant weight on ensuring good design. As has been referred to, I think, by Councillor Dixon and one other, I can't say the existing, I'm not quite sure, I'd call it a carbuncle, rather like the King would have done on wherever it was in London. But I think the proposed design is significantly better looking, more fitting to the street scene than the current existing lean-tos, we're calling it. And I actually would place significant weight on that, more so than on BE1 about the concern about the corner. I think my judgment would be that the corner, the impact of the extra 1 metre, whatever it is, on the width is outweighed by far by the improvement in the look at the property and the removal of the lean-to. On that basis, can I make that a proposal to grant planning permission for this?
I think Councillor Kennedy was just in front.
I would like to second that.
Thank you. I think I can tell which way the vote's going to go. Anyone else want to speak? No. Sorry.
Could we delegate conditions?
Oh yes, we'll need.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Happy with that? More work for me. Yes. All those in favour of grant, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That's carried. Now move on to agenda item 8, which is W/24/0927, land to north east of High Cross Lane, Shrewley.
So this application W/24/0927, which is land north of High Cross Lane in Shrewley. This application for the erection of stables, a menage and some hard standing. So you'll see on the side there the site outlined in red. Hopefully see my cursor here as well. Okay. The next slide is just an aerial view of the site. Again, the land outlined in red. This is just a slightly different view of the aerial view. So you can see at the bottom there, we've got the existing vehicular access onto High Cross Lane and existing access drive and parking. But other than that, the site is just an open field. And on the left-hand side, we've got a zoomed-out version of the proposed site plan. So we've got the stables to the south, we've got the hard standing in between, and the menage further to the north. And I've given you a more of a better view of that on the right-hand side as well. So this is the proposed scheme. You'll see from my report that the scheme has been amended since first submitted. It's been substantially reduced in size. The design's been altered to look more like a stables, linear building, timber construction. So based on what's been submitted now and as amended, the scheme is considered to represent appropriate facilities for outdoor sport and recreation, which is considered to be appropriate development in the Greenbelt. This is just a plan of the menage and the proposed fencing. You'd also see from my report that the fencing itself doesn't actually require planning permission. And then this is a photo view from High Cross Lane, just showing the existing access. And you can see there again, there's nothing on site currently, just an open field. And this is a view of the existing access drive leading to the parking area. So just to summarise, as amended, the siting and design is considered acceptable. The scheme has been substantially reduced to reflect the size of the land, so the number of horses that actually can be accommodated on the land. So from our point of view, it is appropriate development in the Greenbelt. There's no objection from highways, there's no objection from ecology. You'll see from the Parish Council's concerns was around whether the site could be used as a business for livery and stabling. You'll see from my report that I've added a condition to ensure that that is not the case, that it is only used for the use of the applicant, so not used as a business. So we've added that condition as well. And we're recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a bit of a pedant about this, but on your slide you refer to it as a manege, M-A-N-E-G-E. In the report it's referred to as a ménage. A ménage being a family arrangement in French, as I understand, whereas a manège, either in French or Russian, is an outdoor or indoor horse exercising area. So can we have it corrected to be a manège all the way through, please?
All day, thank you.
Lessons over, Councillor Phelps.
I say we haven't got anybody from the Parish Council come to speak to us tonight. I think this is totally appropriate in this particular area. I know it is Greenbelt, but we're talking horses and sensible stabling. I'm happy it was reduced. So unless people want to discuss it, I'm quite happy to move that we approve this application.
You were just going to say. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Phillips' hand was up quickly and down again. You were voting. You were very quick. Clearly carried by a majority. In fact, unanimous. So we now move on. That's all the applications. Have we got a report?
Report is there.
Yeah. Any comments? Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my comment is it's more again around the enforcement appeals that are set out towards the end of this report, and really just to use this to say to members that what we're planning to do shortly with the Chair's agreement, and I know Councillor Dixon, this was something that you were interested in as well, is start to bring a report to members, possibly every quarter, we're not quite sure yet, which will set out the enforcement action that is ongoing at any particular time. Well, it will be for the previous quarter, because there's a sense, quite rightly, I think, that might be information that is helpful to members. I mention it within the context of the appeals report because what you're seeing there is a number of appeals against enforcement notices that have been issued, which means that we're issuing more enforcement notices, which is an indicator of the sort of level of activity within the enforcement team. So hopefully from next time, or it may be March, but we are working on this. We will bring together. It'll be a summary report. It will be in a similar kind of style to the appeals report, and it will specifically relate to formal action that we've taken. So where we've served notices for a particular breach of planning control. What it's not going to do is give members a list of every possible issue that's been raised with us, because, as I think you'll appreciate, quite a lot of those issues turn out not to be anything significant and wouldn't really be appropriate to put those all onto a report in the public domain. Yeah, I just wanted to mention to members that we're going to be doing that, so it will be an extra report for you to look at going forward.
Councillor Kennedy.
I just have a question in the report on W23-1746, our old friend, the land south of Chesterton Gardens. This is the outline planning application, which is now designated a called-in application. Since we've now approved, as I recall, a reserved matters application for this site, what happens to this appeal, or does it keep on sort of buzzing around?
In a way, there's kind of multiple submissions relating to the one development. And yes, you're right, reserved matters have been granted. However, this outline application was submitted prior to that, and it was then called in, so it will follow the normal process, and there will be a decision, hopefully, coming quite shortly. The hearing did take place back in November last year. So I know what I would anticipate the outcome of that to be, but I think we'll just have to wait and see. But whichever way you look at it, there is a planning permission and reserved matters that have been granted.
Whatever is decided, it
Absolutely.
has no impact on the reserved matters that have already been agreed.
So in a sense, it's almost a moot point because there is already that permission in place. But nevertheless, it was a submission that was made, it was called in, and so it's just going through. It's in the latter stages of that process now.
Perhaps we'll see it before we're abolished. Right, we've completed the business of the planning committee, so I declare the meeting closed at about 12 minutes to 8. Thank you.